My name is Margot R. Spaeth, 30 years old. I work as a systems analyst for a logistics company. Stable job, decent salary, nothing flashy, but solid. And I've built my life around one simple idea: predictability. I rent a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood about 15 minutes outside the city, and it's in my name only. My credit, my lease, my furniture, my routines, the kind of setup that doesn't impress anyone on social media but keeps you sane in real life. I'm not rich, but I've built something that makes sense, and for the most part, it stayed peaceful until Trent moved in. Trent is 27, marketing, always online, always curating, and when he smiles at his phone, it's never just for himself. It's for the invisible crowd that follows him everywhere. Everything is content. Brunch is content. Work stress is content. Even healing journeys are content, which sounds inspiring until you realize an argument can become content too. He moved into my townhouse about 8 months ago, no formal lease change, and he contributes to groceries and occasionally utilities. But I covered most of the expenses because splitting everything line by line felt like turning love into an invoice. For the most part, it was fine. Loud, dramatic sometimes, but manageable until last night, because last night exposed what the noise was really for. The argument started over dishes. That's not a metaphor. Actual dishes. I got home around 6:30, dropped my bag, walked into the kitchen, and the sink was full while the dishwasher was empty, again. And it wasn't just the mess, it was the repetition, the way the same issue kept coming back, like a test of whether I would eventually stop asking. I've asked calmly before. I've even shown him how to load the dishwasher so it fits more efficiently, because he claims he never knows how to stack it. I wasn't trying to parent him. I was trying to keep the house from becoming a science experiment. So I said, "Hey, can you please run the dishwasher before it turns into a science experiment?" And I tried to keep my tone neutral, like this was a minor correction, not a referendum on our relationship. He snapped immediately. "Oh my God, do you ever come home and not complain?" And the way he said complain was sharp, like he'd been waiting for a moment to use that word. "I wasn't complaining," I said. "I was asking." That's when it escalated. He started listing every minor grievance he'd apparently been storing for months, like he'd been collecting them quietly, just so he could dump them all at once when the timing felt dramatic enough. How I'm controlling. How I micromanage. How I make him feel like a roommate with chores. I stood there watching him build a case against me, and I realized this wasn't about dishes at all. It was about power, about who gets to define what's happening. I said, "You are a roommate with chores," and the second the sentence left my mouth, I knew it wouldn't help, because truth doesn't calm someone who wants a scene. He grabbed his phone mid-argument, which he does when he wants an audience. I assumed he was texting his friends, or opening a group chat, or posting a vague story to get sympathy, because he's done that before in smaller ways. The hints, the captions, the soft accusations designed to make people fill in the blanks with my guilt. 15 minutes later, he stormed upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. I stayed downstairs and cleaned the dishes myself, not angrily, just methodically, because in my mind, if I kept the routine intact, the moment would pass. Then my phone buzzed. 3 notifications. Trent had just posted on Instagram. Black and white selfie. Good lighting, filtered, intentional. Caption. Single and starting fresh. Posted 16 minutes after we argued about dishes. 16 minutes. We were still technically in the same house. At first, I thought it was a joke, maybe sarcasm, one of those vague growth posts he likes to make when he's annoyed. But the selfie wasn't taken in the moment. It was from earlier that week, the kind of photo you take when you already know you'll need it later. The caption didn't read impulsive either. Single. Not feeling single. Not might as well be single. Single, present tense declared. Within 5 minutes, it had 30 likes. Comments were already rolling in. "So proud of you. You deserve better. On to bigger things." People move fast when there's drama to consume, and suddenly my private argument was being eaten by strangers like a snack. I walked upstairs and knocked on the bedroom door. No answer. I knocked again. "What?" he yelled through the door. "Are we broken up?" I asked calmly. There was silence for 2 seconds, the kind that feels like a calculation. Then he said, "Maybe we are," like he was daring me to flinch. "You act like you don't even like me," he added, and I stood there thinking about what he'd just done, publicly announced being single in my house while still living in it, while my neighbor's porch lights were on, while my life was still arranged around him being here. "Are you serious?" I asked. "Maybe I'm done being treated like a child over dishes," he shot back. That wasn't an answer. It was a headline. I went back downstairs, opened Instagram again, watched the comments climb, watched mutual friends texting me screenshots. One message read, "Girl, what happened?" And that's when something clicked. This wasn't about feelings. This was about leverage. He was creating a version of reality where he was the wounded one and I was the villain, without ever having to say it directly. So I did something simple. I liked the post. Then I commented, "Perfect." No emojis, no paragraph. Just a clean acknowledgement that if he wanted to declare something publicly, I would treat it like it was real. Then I went to the garage and grabbed the spare lock set I bought 6 months ago for unrelated reasons, and I started swapping the deadbolt. Not angrily, just efficiently. I wasn't arguing semantics. I was adjusting logistics. By the time I finished swapping the lock, it had been about 20 minutes since I commented. My phone was lighting up nonstop. His post had exploded. People tagging him, messaging me, mutual friends trying to piece together what happened, like it was a live episode. Then the bedroom door flew open upstairs. "What the hell did you comment?" he yelled as he came down the stairs, phone in hand, eyes wide like he didn't expect consequences to exist offline. I was at the kitchen counter putting the old lock into the box. "Exactly what I meant," I said calmly. "You're embarrassing me," he snapped. "You announced you were single," I replied. "It's accurate." "It was heat of the moment," he said fast. "It's a post." "Is it deleted?" I asked. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. No, it was still up. The audience was still watching. The story was still running. "Then it stands," I said. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You didn't actually change the locks." I held up the new key. I did. His face shifted from anger to confusion, then to fear, because fear shows up when someone realizes the tactic didn't work. "You're insane," he said. "No," I said. "I'm consistent." He walked to the front door and tried the handle. Locked. Rain had started outside around that moment. Light at first, then heavier, and he stood there staring at me, trying to gauge if I was bluffing, trying to find the crack where my guilt would open the door. I wasn't bluffing. "You can't just throw me out," he said. "You said you're single," I replied. "That changes logistics." "That was a figure of speech," he snapped. "Is it still up?" I asked again. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "You're overreacting over dishes." "No," I corrected. "I'm reacting to public declarations." He tried to pivot, to laugh, to minimize, but the rain got louder and the house stayed calm. And for the first time since we started fighting, he looked small standing there, soaked in the consequences of his own performance. He stomped upstairs and came back down with a tote bag, laptop, makeup case, random clothes, essentials, and when he reached the door, he paused, like he expected me to soften. "This is going to make you look horrible," he said quietly. "You already handled optics," I replied. He stepped onto the porch. Rain was heavier now, soaking his hair, smudging the careful image he always kept polished, and he turned back once more. "Unlock it." "No," I said, and closed the door. The house went quiet, and for the first time that night I could hear my own breathing. He didn't leave, not right away. I watched through the front window as he stood on the porch in the rain staring at his phone, probably reading the comments, probably reading mine, probably realizing that applause doesn't equal shelter. Within 5 minutes, his post changed. The caption was edited. Single and starting fresh became something softer, some damage control reframing, but the original screenshot was already circulating. 2 different friends had sent it to me. Then my phone buzzed with a DM from someone I didn't recognize. "You might want to see this." I watched Trent reach the end of the driveway, stop under the streetlight, and start typing furiously, his screen glowing against the rain like a small, desperate stage. My phone buzzed again. Missed calls, then texts, then another unknown number calling, and I didn't answer, because if I answered, I'd be back inside his game. I blocked him, not out of anger, out of structure. If someone declares they're single publicly, the next step isn't negotiation, it's boundary enforcement. I blocked his number, blocked him on Instagram, blocked him everywhere he could reach me. Clean lines, clean silence. Then I opened the DM from the stranger. It was a screenshot from Trent's private group chat, time-stamped earlier that evening, before we even finished arguing. His message said, "Watch this, I'm about to shake her up," followed by a laughing emoji, 2 minutes before the single and starting fresh post. My stomach didn't drop, it solidified. This wasn't emotional. It was performative, calculated. He wasn't venting, he was testing leverage, and he expected me to react the way I always had, with pleading, with fixing, with apologizing for being the stable one. I looked back outside. He was pacing on the porch now, trying handles, borrowing phones, sending emails that wouldn't matter, and in that moment, I understood something that would change the rest of this story. This wasn't a breakup post, it was a control test, and I had just failed his test on purpose. He knocked on the door hard, the kind of knock that isn't about being heard, it's about being obeyed. "Open it," Trent said. Through the wood, voice tight and furious, like he expected the door to feel guilty and unlock itself. I didn't answer. I stood in the hallway for a moment with my phone in my hand, not shaking, not pacing, just still, because the moment I spoke, I knew he'd turn it into a scene again. He knocked again, louder. "You have to be kidding me." Then the handle rattled, like the lock might surrender out of sympathy. It didn't. The rain got heavier, a steady roar now, and I watched his silhouette through the glass panel beside the door, hair flattening against his head, shoulders hunching, phone glowing in his hand like he was texting an audience for backup. I didn't open the door fully, but I did crack it just slightly once, keeping my hand on the edge, not letting him push through. "Grab a ride," I said calmly. "We'll coordinate pickup of the rest of your things tomorrow during daylight." I didn't say it like a threat. I said it like a calendar entry. He stared at me like he couldn't process that I wasn't negotiating. "You're humiliating me," he snapped, rainwater running down his face, mascara starting to smudge because even his anger was curated. "You humiliated me first," I said, and closed the door again. He didn't leave. That was the part I hadn't anticipated. I watched through the window as he stood on the porch in the rain, scrolling, typing, staring up at the house like he was waiting for the dramatic music cue where I run out and apologize. Instead, the house stayed quiet. My house. Within minutes, his post changed again. The caption was edited, not deleted, rewritten into something that sounded like damage control, like he was trying to guide the audience gently away from the word single without admitting he'd used it. But screenshots had already spread. Friends had already messaged me. Mutuals were already treating it like a live episode. He knocked again. "Delete your comment," he said through the door, voice strained. "It makes me look stupid." I didn't respond. That wasn't my responsibility, and we both knew it. Outside, the rain poured harder, and I could hear neighbors' porch lights clicking on, the soft hum of attention shifting toward our street. Trent hated being watched when he couldn't control the angle, and that alone made him knock again, faster, as if speed could force me into reacting. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I ignored it. Another unknown number. Ignored. He was borrowing someone's phone already, trying to bypass the block-like rules were something he could outsmart with persistence. Then my email pinged. Subject line. "Are you serious?" I didn't open it. Boundary means boundary, even when curiosity tries to dress itself up as closure. Through the living room window, I could see him pacing, soaked, furious, checking his phone repeatedly, probably reading comments, probably realizing the support online wasn't translating into a warm place to sleep. Eventually, a car pulled up. One of his friends. Trent stepped down from the porch, talking fast, pointing at the house dramatically. The friend looked at the door, looked back at him, then shrugged. Like even loyalty has limits when someone else's drama is trying to become your problem. They left just like that, and Trent stood there alone again, rain swallowing his confidence, one drop at a time. Minutes passed, then more. The knocking slowed, then stopped. I checked the doorbell camera feed without sound. He was sitting on the porch step now, head down, scrolling, the posture of someone who had finally run out of lines. He looked smaller than he had an hour ago, not because I felt sorry for him, but because reality had finally stepped in and stripped the performance down to its basics. No audience, no access, no leverage. That was the last time I spoke to him that night. Actually, it was the last time I spoke to him for the rest of that night. I muted the door camera notifications and went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, sat at the table, and let the quiet settle. The dishes were clean. The house was calm. The rain was loud enough to drown out the old instinct to go fix things. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. The house felt different. Not empty, just settled, like it had exhaled after holding tension for months. I checked my phone out of habit. 27 missed calls, most from unknown numbers. 3 voicemails, all from Trent, clearly using other phones. I didn't listen to them. I didn't need the soundtrack to know what the words would be. A blend of blame, pleading, and threats disguised as feelings. There were 6 texts from mutual friends. "What happened? Are you okay? He's saying you locked him out in a storm." Interesting phrasing. Even in their messages, I could feel the narrative already being shaped. Not, he posted he was single in your house. Not, he tried to weaponize social media again. Just you locked him out in the rain like weather was the crime scene and I was the villain. I opened Instagram from a secondary account I use for work, one he didn't know about. His post was gone, deleted sometime after midnight. In its place was a story, black screen, white text. Crazy how fast people switch up when you express your feelings. A sad emoji, no mention of declaring himself single, no mention of the timeline, no mention of the group chat screenshot. Just a vague martyr narrative that invited strangers to fill in the blanks with my guilt. Predictable. I didn't respond publicly. Instead, I did something practical. I boxed his things. Not aggressively, not tossing, just organized. Clothes into storage bins, shoes into a separate box, bathroom items together, chargers in a labeled bag, anything that could be considered essential for a night or two. I photographed everything as I packed, not because I wanted a fight, but because I refused to be unprepared for one. Around 11 a.m., my doorbell camera pinged. Trent, dry now. Different outfit, hairstyled, arms crossed. He looked like he'd rehearsed this version of himself, the wronged partner arriving for a confrontation that he could film if needed. He rang the bell once, then twice, then knocked, then tried the handle like maybe I'd changed my mind overnight. Still locked. His phone came out immediately. He stood on my porch and typed, probably texting someone that I was ignoring him, maybe texting the same group chat, maybe deciding which version of the story would get him the most sympathy today. Then he knocked again, longer this time, the kind of knock meant to draw neighbors' curiosity. I didn't move. "You can't just ghost me like this," he shouted through the door. I didn't respond. "You're acting insane," he added, louder, because louder is what people do when they think volume can substitute for authority. I watched him through the camera feed, silent, as he stepped back and lifted his phone, front-facing camera, recording himself. I could read his lips. "This is what emotional abuse looks like." He said it like a tagline, like a clip meant to be shared, like my door was a prop in his personal documentary. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so clear. He wasn't coming back for resolution. He was coming back for content. He finished recording, lowered the phone, and stared at the door one more time. For the first time since the argument, his face looked unsure, because attention online doesn't unlock doors in real life. After a minute, he left. About an hour later, I got another message from the same anonymous account that had sent me the group chat screenshot. "He's losing it," it said. Followed by a short video clip, Trent in a friend's car, speaking fast, eyes red, but makeup flawless, practicing lines about being punished for expressing feelings. My stomach stayed steady. I didn't need more proof of what I already knew. I stayed quiet and kept moving, like the calm in my house mattered more than the noise outside it. I drafted a single email in my head without writing it yet. Not a fight, not an essay, just logistics, pick-up windows, rules, boundaries in black and white, because if Trent wanted a story, I was going to give him paperwork. And as the days stretched on, one thought kept repeating in my mind with the same clarity as the lock clicking shut the night before. This wasn't about dishes. It never was. It was about control, and for the first time, he didn't have it. Around 2:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with something that wasn't from a friend, wasn't from Trent, and wasn't from social media. It was from the landlord portal. The subject line was neutral, almost boring. "Maintenance request submitted for your unit." I opened it, expecting something simple, maybe a system glitch or a plumbing notification. Instead, I saw Trent's message. He had filed a complaint through the tenant portal, claiming he was being denied access to his residence. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Then the second detail hit me. The portal had been accessed using my login credentials. That meant he hadn't just tried to escalate the story publicly. He had tried to create a formal record that I was locking a tenant out of his home. Except there was a small problem with that strategy. Trent wasn't on the lease. Not his name, not his ID, not even an occupant note. The townhouse existed in the system under one tenant only, Margot R. Spaeth. I didn't get angry. I didn't panic. I just changed the password immediately, logged out of every active session, and then called the property manager directly. Her name was Diane. Calm voice, mid-50s, someone who had heard every kind of domestic chaos tenants could invent. "Hi, Diane," I said. "I'm calling about a maintenance request that was just filed from my address." She pulled up the record while we were on the phone. "Oh, yes, I see it," she said slowly. "Something about being locked out of the property?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "The person who submitted that request isn't on the lease and accessed the portal without my permission." There was a pause while she checked the file. "You are the only tenant listed here," she confirmed. "Correct. And there are no additional occupants registered." "Correct." Another pause. "As long as you're not violating occupancy limits," she said finally, "we can't force you to grant access to someone not on the lease." "I'm not," I said. "All right, I'll make a note in the system. Documentation." Another clean line. I hung up and leaned back in the chair for a moment. The pattern was clearer now. Trent wasn't just trying to win the argument. He was trying to create leverage anywhere he could find it. Social media, friends, property records. But that strategy only works if the other person reacts emotionally. And I wasn't reacting anymore. About 30 minutes later, another message arrived from the anonymous account that had sent the group chat screenshot the night before. "He's live right now." Attached was a screen recording. Trent sat in the passenger seat of someone's car. His eyes were slightly red, but his makeup was flawless. The camera angle was perfect. Of course it was. Trent didn't accidentally film himself badly. Sometimes, he said into the camera with quiet intensity, "You find out who someone really is when you express your feelings and they punish you for it." The comments flooded instantly. "You deserve better." "That's toxic." "Stay strong, King." Someone asked the obvious question. "Wait, are you actually single?" Trent paused just long enough to make it feel dramatic. Then he said, "I guess I am now." Interesting. So the word single wasn't a figure of speech anymore. Now it was a storyline. He kept talking about betrayal, control, emotional safety. Not once did he mention the original Instagram caption. Not once did he mention the group chat message. Not once did he explain why someone declaring themselves single inside someone else's home might trigger consequences. Optics. The performance had simply evolved. I watched the entire live video without reacting. Then I closed the recording and opened my laptop. Instead of responding publicly, I wrote one email. Subject line, pickup window. The message itself was simple. 2 options. Tomorrow between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m., or Saturday between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. Items will be placed outside. No entry. No discussion. No debate. Logistics only. Then I sent it and closed the laptop. There was nothing else left to clarify. Saturday afternoon came faster than I expected. At exactly 2 p.m., a silver sedan pulled into my driveway. I had Trent's things stacked neatly on the porch, labeled and organized. Clothes, shoes, electronics, bathroom items, even the framed photos he had hung on my walls without asking. No trash bags, no pettiness, just closure. The car door opened, and Trent stepped out slowly. No phone in his hand this time. No live stream. No dramatic speech ready for an audience. He looked at the boxes for a long moment, like part of him hadn't believed they would actually be there. Like part of him thought this whole situation would cool off, and I would eventually unlock the door with an apology. I didn't open the door. I stayed inside, watching through the living room window. He walked up the porch, crouched beside the boxes, and started reading the labels. Each one neatly written in black marker. Clothes, shoes, bathroom items, laptop charger. He began loading them into the trunk of the car one by one. Halfway through the process, he stopped. He looked at the door, not angry this time, just waiting. Maybe expecting a final conversation. Maybe expecting a last emotional scene where he could reclaim control of the narrative. I didn't move. After about 10 seconds, he returned to loading the boxes. When the trunk was full, he placed the last empty container beside the porch step and did something I didn't expect. He took a key out of his pocket, my spare key. He placed it carefully on top of the empty box. No speech, no message, just the key. Then he got back into the car. The engine started, and the sedan drove away. I waited 5 minutes before opening the door. The rain had stopped, but the porch still smelled like wet pavement. I stepped outside and picked up the key. It felt lighter than it should have. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Then a text arrived. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. The sentence felt familiar, like he was still testing the line. I typed 3 words. You went first. Then I blocked that number too. No more responses. No more engagement. The dishes were clean. The house was quiet. And for the first time in 2 years, the silence in my home felt honest. Saturday evening settled into the house slowly after Trent drove away. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt settled, like the air itself had finally stopped bracing for the next argument. I carried the empty plastic storage bins back inside and stacked them neatly in the hallway closet. The same place they had been before Trent moved in 8 months earlier. Routine. That was the thing I had been protecting all along. When someone disrupts routine with chaos, it's tempting to fight chaos with more chaos. But chaos is Trent's language, not mine. My language is structure. I placed the spare key he returned on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a moment. It looked harmless enough, a small metal object, but the weight of what it represented sat heavier than expected. 8 months of shared space, 2 years of dating, and a relationship that ended because someone decided a public performance was more important than a private conversation. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I didn't answer. Then the text arrived. Look, I know you're mad. Different tone this time. No accusation, no drama, just a soft opening line. I recognized the tactic immediately. Anger hadn't worked. Shame hadn't worked. Now he was trying reasonable Trent. I set the phone down and poured myself a glass of water. 10 minutes passed before another message appeared. I didn't expect you to actually change the locks. The words made me smile slightly. Of course he didn't. Because his entire strategy depended on the assumption that I would react emotionally and then eventually soften. That's how it had always worked before. Another message came. You could have at least talked to me. There it was. The quiet attempt to rewrite the story. I picked up the phone and typed back 3 words. You went first. Then I blocked that number too. No response window. No second conversation. Just the same clean boundary. After that, my phone stayed quiet for the rest of the evening. No more unknown numbers. No more borrowed phones. No more attempts to reopen the door. I walked through the house slowly that night, noticing small things that had been invisible before. The living room felt larger. The kitchen counters were clear. The couch didn't have a pile of half-edited marketing materials on it anymore. Even the air felt different. Lighter. It wasn't relief exactly, it was clarity. The next morning, I woke up without the familiar tension in my chest that usually followed one of Trent's emotional blow-ups. My phone showed a few messages from friends checking in, some curious, some supportive. One message stood out. It was from the same anonymous account that had sent the group chat screenshot. Just thought you should know something. Attached was another screenshot, the same private group chat. This one was older, 2 weeks before the argument. Trent's message read, thinking about moving out soon. Just need the right moment to push things. Another message followed. Maybe start a little chaos so she's the one who ends it. A laughing emoji. My stomach didn't drop this time. It settled. Because suddenly the entire timeline snapped into place. The dishes argument. The Instagram post. The dramatic narrative online. The tenant complaint through the landlord portal. None of it had been spontaneous. It was all pressure. A controlled escalation meant to create leverage. If I had panicked. If I had apologized. If I had begged him to take the post down. He would have had the upper hand. Instead, the moment he declared himself single publicly, the leverage flipped. I closed the screenshot and set the phone down. The strange thing was, I didn't feel angry. Anger requires emotional investment. What I felt instead was something quieter. Understanding. Trent wasn't trying to destroy the relationship. He was trying to control the ending of it. But control only works when the other person plays along. And I didn't. Later that afternoon, I walked outside and checked the porch one last time. Nothing left behind. No notes, no forgotten items. The space looked exactly like it had before Trent ever moved in. I stepped back inside and locked the door again out of habit. The click sounded final. Some people think breakups are explosions. Shouting, crying, doors slamming. But sometimes the real ending is quieter than that. Sometimes it's just a lock changing, a few boxes on a porch, a spare key left behind, and the realization that someone who thrives on public attention can't do much when the other person simply refuses to perform. That night, I washed the last of the dishes and placed them carefully in the dishwasher. The kitchen was silent. The house was calm. And I learned something simple. When someone tests you publicly, the only answer that works is private action. If they say they're single, believe them and adjust accordingly.